Hi, this is Bob Costas, and you're listening to the ML Sports Platter.
And the ML Sports Platter is back with you all over the major platforms like Spotify, Google, Apple, Stitcher, Deezer, anywhere you get your podcast. Find that podcast button, tap it, hit subscribe, hit search, ML Sports Platter, that is, and then hit subscribe. And new and archived episodes will go right into your smartphone device. Hit me on Twitter at Mike L Sports and ML Sports Platter on both Facebook and Instagram. We are presented by Liverpool Physical Therapy, Sit Me and Sit Syracuse, and our great friends at Welch & Company Jewelers. Log on to welchjewelers.com today. Shop the showcase with Welch & Company Jewelers. Engagement rings, wedding rings, bracelets, watches, you name it. They've got it. Daniel and Luce and the gang doing an amazing job. Welch & Company Jewelers, top-notch jewelry, specials every week, and the showcase right there on the website at welchjewelers.com. Well, today in Major League Baseball is a very, very special day. It is the first time in history, and frankly, this is probably way, 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 way overdue. Today's Lou Gehrig Day, and this is so cool. It's so great that they're finally doing this, and it's going to be a specific day chosen for Lou Gehrig Day. It's going to mark when Gehrig became the Yankees' starting first baseman, cementing the start of his incredible streak of consecutive games played, and I think he's the greatest first baseman of all time. And who better to talk to about this and what it means for baseball, what it means for Gehrig's place in the game and the heritage and all the rest. Tell you what, it's Jonathan Eig. That's who you talk to, at Jonathan Eig on Twitter. And I got to tell you, folks, if you haven't read it yet, you got to pick up his biography on Lou Gehrig. It is absolutely positively incredible. I would, if I were you, not only read it, but read it a couple of times because it's so good. It's so informative. The interviews are amazing. And it's called Luckiest Man, The Life and Death of Lou Gehrig. It also won a Casey Award for Best Baseball Book of the Year. And the recent Ali bio by Jonathan Eig, by the way, picked that up as well. That one won a Penn ESPN Award for literary sports writing. Jonathan Eig, the best-selling author, joins us to talk Lou Gehrig Day. Jonathan, how are you? Welcome back. Thanks so much.
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing great. What does this mean for you? You know, you're the author of the definitive Lou Gehrig biography. What does it mean that they finally have a day just for the Iron Horse?
I think it's great, mostly for the ALS community. I think they're the ones who are going to appreciate this the most because that's a community that does not get the attention it deserves. It's still what they call an orphan disease. Lou Gehrig brought fame and recognition to this disease, and he helped create an image of strength around this disease that melts your muscles away. So for MLB to make a day for Gehrig and to celebrate every year what he means and what he was all about is just a great thing for everybody who's fighting this disease, everybody who's lost a loved one, and that's what I'm most excited about.
So is there any part of Gehrig's greatness, his career, that actually falls under the underrated category? And I ask that because even though he's in the Hall of Fame, he's in Monument Park, he's, in my opinion, the greatest first baseman of all time, it seems as though when you ask anybody, it could be media, fans, whoever, greatest baseball players ever go. And it usually takes them, they have to get through Mays and Mantle and, you know, Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb, and then they get to Gehrig, much like it takes them 15, 20 names to rattle off, you know, Ted Williams before they get to Stan Musial or Frank Robinson, which is crazy. So is there any part of Gehrig and his greatness and his accomplishments, et cetera, that you find underrated?
Yeah, lots of things. First of all, I think because he was quiet and low-key and he played in the shadow of Babe Ruth, he's not recognized as high up on the list as he should be, just for all-around greatness. You know, his numbers are off the chart. You give him another few years, which he certainly would have played at least 3 or 4 years without ALS, and he racks up ridiculous numbers that are probably, you know, untouchable in the record book. But I would say this, the 1938 season, when he played an entire season with ALS, with symptoms of ALS already clear, He didn't know it, but we do now. And he played every game, took the team to the World Series, hit 295, 930 OPS, 114 RBIs, 29 home runs. A terrible off year for Gehrig, but to me, one of the greatest accomplishments in all of sports, because he was doing it with a disease that was literally melting his muscles away day by day.
You have him as the greatest first baseman ever, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. The RBI total and just the numbers and the collection of things that he did, I think you got to put him at number one. What do you hope people say about your Gehrig book when they get done reading it? Now, of course, you can add in the wrinkle that there is a Lou Gehrig Day. There's a little bit of extra appreciation recently. But what do you hope people say about the book when they're done with it?
Well, I hope they feel like I did honor to this man's story. You know, he's such a kind, decent, strong, humble man. And he didn't make it easy for me as a biographer because he didn't talk that much and he didn't write a lot of letters and he never wrote a memoir. So, you know, it was tough to crack the mystery of this man's personality. And I hope that I did him justice. I know that I tried my hardest and put everything I had into it. And ultimately, that's all you can do.
Well, it's amazing. I've read it. I'm looking at it right now. It's on my bookshelf as a part of the collection. We're on the ML Sports Platter here, brought to you by Stanley Law Offices and Brian Comboy of Mass Mutual, New York State, with a terrific best-selling author. Jonathan Eig, of course, the most recent one, Muhammad Ali, the bio that he wrote. I had him on for that, but we're celebrating Lou Gehrig Day, June 2nd. Luckiest Man is the book, The Life and Death of Lou Gehrig, online where books are sold. And major bookstores. You talk about the quiet, cool, calm, collected Lou Gehrig, and then you write a bio about a guy who's on the complete other end of the spectrum from a personality standpoint. How different was that for you approaching once you did the Gehrig side of it, and then you jump into maybe the most talkative athlete of all time in Muhammad Ali?
Ali was a lot more fun in that respect because not only did he never shut up. I mean, you could go online now and just watch Ali on YouTube all day, all week, and never run out of new material. But also, you know, I was working at a time when most of the people who knew Ali were still around. And for Gehrig, it was hard to find people who knew him. He didn't have any kids. He didn't even have any nieces or nephews. So I found, I think, 30 people who had met him or knew him. Nobody who was really intimate who knew him very well. They had all passed away by the time I started working on the book. So that was one of the joys of working on the Muhammad Ali story, was being able to sit down face-to-face with people who knew him really well.
What do you think Lou Gehrig would think about the game today?
You know, it's always tempting to say that the old guys would appreciate or that they would complain about the high salaries and the attitude. I don't know. I think Gehrig was a pretty cool guy. He didn't complain about much. Although, you know, when the Yankees put cushions in the dugout instead of like a hardwood bench, he complained. He said this was going to make the players too soft. So you can only imagine what he'd think about the clubhouses today. With all of their amenities and the first class travel and all of that. But you know, I think Gehrig would have still just loved the game. He was, you know, an All-American boy. He loved baseball. He loved what sports could do for a kid, lifting a kid out of poverty. This was a first generation immigrant who baseball took his family out of poverty, and you know, the game is still the same in many of those respects.
So we've established that he's the greatest first baseman of all time. But would you say that he and Ruth, when you look at 1-2 combos in team sports history, is that number one? We've had a lot of them, Montana to Rice and Gretzky, Messier, some of them that come to mind. But do you have those two at the top, Jonathan?
Obviously, I'm biased as a Yankee fan and as a Gehrig lover. But yeah, I don't think it's pretty rare that I mean, these clearly, in my book, two of the top 10 baseball players of all time. And to have them playing on the same team for so many years, it's hard for me to imagine another pair that you could say that about. Two of the top 10 in their sport playing simultaneously, that's pretty special.
Yeah, and hitting back-to-back. In what ways do you think Gehrig made Ruth a better player and a better person?
Well, first of all, as a player, Gehrig saw a lot more pitches, a lot more good pitches. Ruth saw a lot more good pitches because he had Gehrig behind him in the lineup. You did not want to, you did not want to walk Babe Ruth. He led he set the record for most walks, but he would have had even more walks. They would have put him on all the time if Gehrig hadn't been batting behind him. And Gehrig probably lost a lot of RBIs because Ruth was clearing the bases with all those home runs. So they had a huge impact on one another. As a person, I think Ruth really loved Gehrig as a little brother, and even loved Gehrig's parents because Ruth was raised in an orphanage and often felt alone, and he was out every night with women, but he didn't have a family to go home to that took care of him like a little boy. And I think that he loved Lou in that way, and loved Lou's parents because it was the closest thing he had to an older family of his own.
You look at the all-time RBI list, and Gehrig is right there at 6, and ahead of him, Bonds, A-Rod, a couple of steroid guys. I think all of the guys, even who use steroids, should be in the Hall of Fame. If they were a Hall of Famer, with or without him, I think they should be in it. And you address it, and you maybe pay attention to the era, which the Hall of Fame is never going to do. But you have Bonds and Rodriguez, and then you've got Pujols, Babe Ruth, and Hank Aaron. That's it. That's the list, of guys who are ahead of Lou Gehrig. But, man, I don't know if you do this. I look over at that column right at the number, and I'm going, oh, he was only 5 away from 2,000, That hits a little bit,
Yeah, well, it also hits that he would have played another 4 or 5 years and racked up another 500 RBIs easy.
Oh, yeah, he would have blown away the RBI list, I think.
Yeah, I think so, too. I think he might have been right up there around 4,000 hits and getting close to 700 home runs.
Yeah, no doubt. What was it when you did your research for Gehrig, what was it that jumped out at you that you didn't know going in?
Well, there was a lot. I mean, the big thing to me was figuring out that he actually played all of 38 with symptoms of ALS and seeing the evidence of it, starting even in spring training, seeing how he's complaining of blisters on his hands, finding out that he started ordering lighter bats as the season went along because he was compensating for the loss of muscle. I mean, that just blew me away. And then finding the letters that he wrote in those last couple of years of his life and seeing those for the first time, I was the first one to document that. And that just really, I talked about how shy he was and how tough a nut he was to crack, but reading those letters, made clear that this was a really sensitive, really smart, really courageous guy. So that really changed my whole attitude and really changed my life because I just gained so much respect for this guy.
All right, final question for you. I started off by just asking you what it meant, to you personally, being the author of the definitive Gehrig bio, that Major League Baseball has finally come up with a day in his honor. There's 3 guys now, right? I mean, there's Jackie Robinson, Roberto Clemente, and Gehrig now with their own days in celebration of their careers on and off the field. In Gehrig's case, the ALS situation. Clemente's case, being an ambassador for the Latin players and doing so much, of course, off the field to help others and until the last day of his life. And obviously, Jonathan, as you know, Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. 2 of those 3 guys, you've written the definitive biography or a major story behind their career and what happened going into it. The Gehrig bio, which we've been talking about, and Opening Day, the story of Jackie Robinson's first season. You must go back to that and Lou, and now that they announced that, and just Robinson and Gehrig are tied together now with these days, but also your books, I think it ties them together even more as well. Does that sink in for you?
Yeah, it's amazing to me. I grew up as a huge baseball fan, and these guys were immortals to me. And now to have my name connected with them in any way is just incredibly humbling. And I'm honored to. Gehrig, when he made his great speech, said how lucky he was to be able to associate with these ball players that he had been teammates with, and even the teammates he'd played against, even the ball players he'd played against. And I know a little bit of what he feels like because I get to be associated with Gehrig, and I get to be associated with Robinson and with Muhammad Ali, and it's an incredible honor, and that's why it's so important that I work as hard as I can to do justice to their stories and to get it right. I didn't get to meet them. I didn't get to interview them. So I've got to really do the extra work to try to tell their stories the way they deserve to be told.
It's so good. Luckiest Man, The Life and Death of Lou Gehrig. Of course, Lou Gehrig Day is June 2nd. And Jonathan Eig, our guest, the author of that terrific book. And make sure, that you pick up the opening day book on Jackie Robinson and the definitive Muhammad Ali bio as well. All over major bookstores, Amazon.com, online everywhere where books are sold. And, of course, visit his website, JonathanEig.com, and on Twitter, give him a follow at Jonathan Eig. That's at Jonathan EIG. Jonathan, thank you so much. Enjoy your summer, and really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks. It's always good to talk to you.
The ML Sports Platter here, brought to you by Bryant and Stratton College. Log on to bryantstratton.edu. 2- and 4-year degrees are available, and classes are always starting soon. Academics, athletics, excellence at Bryant and Stratton College. And hey, if you're in and around Central New York, you're looking to stay close to home and go to school and craft that degree, they got 2 great locations in Liverpool and on James Street. If you're in the greater state of New York in general, want to kind of venture out to Central New York and go to campuses at Bryant and Stratton College, definitely do it. It's worth it. Everything is rising and growing at Bryant and Stratton. Now have a nursing program. They've got a bunch of other business options that you can take a look at as well. Bryant and Stratton College is the official college of the ML Sports Platter. A tip of the cap thank you as well to the Allen Angus Pub, Prestwick Golf, and your Syracuse insurance agent, Matt Graham of State Farm. Go ahead and log on to SyracuseInsuranceAgent.com. Home, auto, life, health, business, you name it. Get a free rate quote today on insurance and ask Matt about their rate drop as well. Matt Graham at State Farm, like a good neighbor, they're both there. State Farm Insurance and Matt Graham, South Bay Road in North Syracuse. Or if you're around the great state of New York, get that free rate quote. Visit the website, give them a call, SyracuseInsuranceAgent.com. I want to do a deep dive into the career of Lou Gehrig because I just, when you look at these numbers, and I'm with Jonathan obviously all the way, he doesn't obviously, contract ALS. I mean, this guy plays, who knows? I mean, he died at age 37. So, certainly the 1939 season, and the bio is just filled, by the way, with so many rich details, and he talked about that 30. I couldn't believe it when I was reading it. The 1938 season where Gehrig played at the age of 35, basically with ALS the entire year. He came up with a 295 batting average, 114 RBI, and 29 home runs, and 170 hits. It's just unbelievable. It's one of the great single-season accomplishments, I think, in the history of the game. And he didn't know it then. Nobody knew it then. We know it now. But he was suffering mightily already from ALS. But in 1939, Gehrig, obviously that was it. He only played 8 games, and then he was out, and then he was gone 2 years later. And Gehrig in 39, well, let's put it this way. In 37, the year before he played with it, he had a 351 batting average, 158 for RBI, and 37 home runs. He hit over 1,100 for an OPS, and his OBP was 473 at 643 slugging. Could you imagine? He finished 4th in the MVP race that year. You imagine the analytic guys talking about he had 200 hits, right? So I guess that the 200 hits and batting average of 351, does that ruin it for the geeks today? Like, look at those numbers. 1 year later, he dipped, obviously, compared to those numbers severely, but he was battling ALS. He still almost hit 30 home runs and had over 100 RBI. My point is, if he doesn't have the ALS symptoms as early as 38 and playing through those the entire year, he probably puts up another year like 37, and then probably another 1 or 2 after that. So you've got 1938. You can add, I would say, Kindside, 10 to 15 home runs, right? Because he had 37 and 37. So, let's or 5 to 10, I guess. So we'll go with 10 there, and then maybe, the next year he hits 25, 30-ish out, maybe 40. I mean, he hit 49 out in 36. Maybe it's all of those numbers, right? Maybe it's all those numbers that he missed. Maybe 38. He goes for a 330 batting average, and I think in 38, probably another 10 home runs. I think in 39, you're looking at another 120 RBI and another 30 to 40 home runs. And then 40, 38, 30, 39, 40, 41, probably dips a little bit upper 30s. Maybe he plays till he's 40, 41. High level, how long, I don't know. But I think you're looking at a solid 3, 4, 5 years lost with numbers in which, to me, that's about 100 home runs. It's about another, I would say, 5 to 650 or so RBI. And, maybe another, probably, I think on the low side, we're probably looking at, 600 hits, right? Which would have put him in the category of 3,000 hits. He would have hit over 500 home runs. Actually, probably would have hit over 600 home runs. He finished with 493. 1,995 RBI. Not only does he surpass that by miles, but I think he is the all-time RBI leader by miles. Hank Aaron's the all-time leader still at 2,297. I think Lou Gehrig pops that out of the ballpark. He plays another 4 or 5 years in his prime, and that's why I've thought for a long time that he's the greatest RBI guy of all time. When you look at his single seasons, 166, 185, 173, 173, 147, 151, 152, 158. It's absurd. And it's hard to believe, right, that like DiMaggio, Mantle, and Berra all won 3 MVPs, but Gehrig only won 2. He finished second twice. He finished fourth twice. He finished fifth twice. And it's just, the career is remarkable. I think he's the greatest RBI guy. And again, I know he doesn't have the most. I know that's Aaron, but again, career cut short, number one. Number two, look at the single seasons. It's just absurd. His career, retired number, Monument Park, they waived the 5-year waiting period to get him into the Hall of Fame. Makes history in that regard. Batting title, 7 All-Stars, 7-time All-Star, 2-time MVP, first ballot Hall of Famer, 6-time World Series, 6 times in the World Series, and a Triple Crown winner. Absolutely incredible. Really is. And actually, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He played in the World Series 7 times, won 6 out of 7. That lone loss coming in 26. If you know the history behind it, the World Series it was ended by, I think, Babe Ruth trying to steal, right? He was thrown out for the last out. But, the Yankees were obviously a powerhouse with him and Babe Ruth and company. And, oh, by the way, Gehrig is easily one of the greatest postseason performers of all time. His lifetime batting average in the World Series. Remember, it was easier to get there back then, right? It was far easier because you had, you didn't have wild card rounds, you had divisional rounds, you'd have league championship series rounds. You didn't have any of that. You basically won the pennant, and then you went right into the World Series. And it was, an 8, 10, 12 team league for a good solid couple of decades. Lou Gehrig, though, in the World Series, wow. 361 batting average, 35 RBI, and 10 home runs. You look at the collective games, and he had 43 hits, by the way. He hit 1,200 plus on the OPS and 731 slugging, 483 OBP. This guy's numbers career in the World Series were better than his regular season numbers. That is damn impressive. And it's quite simply astonishing. Oh, by the way, 87 total bases in the World Series as well. It's quite astonishing when you look at all these and recognize in a different way, too, like, the Bob Fellers and all these others who lost time from the war. Gehrig doesn't get ALS. Bear doesn't go to the war. Ted Williams doesn't go to the war. Bob Feller doesn't go to the war. Hank Greenberg doesn't go to the war. I could go on and on and on. DiMaggio, all these guys who went to the war, what do their numbers look like now? Honestly. So he had a spectacular career, there's no doubt, and he's on my all-time Major League Baseball team at first base. I have Albert Pujols backing him up. I know Jimmy Fox is in the conversation, but man, for my money historically, nobody. I mean, Gehrig's right there with anybody, you know. And it is crazy because sometimes we think about like, hey, who's the best baseball player of all time? And like I mentioned to Jonathan Eig, like you people just immediately, Willie Mays, you know, Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, you know, Joe DiMaggio. They go right into all of it, right? Ted Williams and Ty Cobb. And if pitchers are included in there, then maybe a bunch of guys get mentioned. You know, Barry Bonds, A-Rod, right? Like Roger Clemens, Greg Maddux. You know, pitchers might get mentioned with them. Christy Mathewson, Walter Johnson. A lot of times, it takes people like 10, 12, 15 names before they get to Lou Gehrig, which is just absolutely, to me, mind-boggling. I think Lou Gehrig's a top 10 player in the history of the game. He very well easily could be way higher than that. You know, and there is a little bit, to me, like a little bit of underrated to his game, to his quality, you know, years lost. And the RBI, when you really take the total, 1,995 is obviously amazing. That's 6th all time. But then you go into the single season RBI totals, and that's where it really jumps out to me. You know, you can talk all day about the Triple Crown, and all the rest. You can talk about the World Series. All those things stand on their own too, no doubt. But I think what really hits for me, and being an all-time RBI guy, you know, a major RBI guy, the greatest RBI guy of all time, you know, it's those single seasons. I mean, think about this too. The dead ball era obviously changed with Babe Ruth and his uppercut swing and all the rest, but look at some of the numbers, you know, RBI-wise, right? Like Ty Cobb wasn't a power hitter, but he still managed to get 119 RBI in a season in 1907. You know, you look at some of these other, like, RBI numbers, which are amazing. Babe Ruth had 146 in 1926. Bob Musial, by the way, the year before that, 1938 with the Yankees, or 1925 with the Yankees, had 138 RBI, right? Like, Ruth and Gehrig both had 142 in 1928. But then, like, Gehrig has 175 RBI in 1927. Arguably the greatest team of all time. You know, Gehrig, again, 173 and 30, 1931, 185. You look at some of these years, like, I mean, Hank Greenberg had some. Jimmy Fox had some. You know, Greenberg went for 184 in 1937. Jimmy Fox went for 175 in 1938. Ted Williams went for 145 in 1939. Hank Greenberg 150 in 1940. But then you start going, and, like, you know, even DiMaggio in 1948, 155 RBI. That's a ton of RBI, there's no doubt. But look at some of these other really good single season. Like, look at Mickey Mantle. The year he won the Triple Crown, 130 in 1956. You have to add 45 RBI to that total, or 55 RBI in the case of 1931, you know, to get to Gehrig's number. That's 55 more RBI than Mickey Mantle, who many consider to be the greatest center fielder of all time. Some people consider him to be the greatest Yankee of all time, the greatest all-around Yankee of all time as well. I mean, you know, I have Ruth, you know, Gehrig, Mantle, and DiMaggio. They're just immovable on that Mount Rushmore. But boy, I mean, you could, you know, with Mantle and the MVPs and the combo of speed and power, you look at him switch hitting, you can argue Mantle. And you look at the prime years, you can argue it if you want. You could argue Mickey Mantle's the greatest Yankee of all time. You could argue DiMaggio. You could argue Gehrig. You could argue, you know, Ruth. I think those four are ahead of, by a tick, Berra, even though for a few-year stretch before Mantle was accepted by the Yankee fans and all the rest, Berra was carrying that team. But man, you know, and for all the other really great ones that they've had in past days, you know, Berra, Bill Dickey, Jeter, Rivera, I mean, it goes on and on, Whitey Ford. Those are the big four, right? But you could argue it. Think about that for a minute. Mickey Mantle, 130 RBI in 1956, and you have to add another 55 to get to that Lou Gehrig high point, that high mark, right? It's incredible. And then I go into like the 90s, right? Like the steroid era. Like Jose Canseco in 1984, 124 RBI. The guy was clearly juicing. Had 124 RBI. That's 61 less than Lou Gehrig at his high point. 61. You look at all these big behemoth sluggers getting all the 126 RBI and this and that, and I don't know who used, who got away with it because there wasn't testing. But like a Juan Gonzalez, even 157 RBI in 1998. He's been under the cloud, the suspicion of steroids. Guess what? You have to add another 28 RBI to get to Gehrig's high watermark. Even A-Rod in that 2007 season where he was lighting it up for the Yankees, even though he got dropped in the postseason batting order by Joe Torre, or was that in 06? That was 06, which was one of the greatest days of my life. But A-Rod, 156 RBI, like you have to add another 29 to get to the Gehrig high watermark. It's unbelievable. J.D. Martinez, I remember for the Boston Red Sox in 2018 when they won the World Series, it was, oh my gosh, look at the year he's having, this RBI total. And it was a great year. It was still 55 short of Lou Gehrig's high watermark. Insane. Just absolutely sensational. And I'm so happy that Major League Baseball is doing this. I think it's well-deserved and a day that is long overdue, and it's awesome that Cal Ripken announced, that it was happening. He announced Lou Gehrig's day. I think it was on MLB Network. You look at the career, you look at the ambassador, you look at the quality of the guy, and hopefully it will raise a ton more money for ALS research. But June 2nd, just a terrific deal, I think, by Major League Baseball. They very rarely get things right. They very rarely get things right. But I think this is definitely a good thing for Major League Baseball. Celebrates one of the legends. And as I mentioned before, Roberto Clemente and Jackie Robinson is the only players whose legacies are celebrated annually with dedicated league-wide days. And again, if you're just wondering why June 2nd, how come it's not, the July 4th with, his Luckiest Man speech or whatever the case may be. June 2nd was specifically chosen as the date for Lou Gehrig Day because it marks when Gehrig became the Yankees' starting first baseman. But I got to tell you that if you look at the life of Lou Gehrig in a very, very crazy way, it's also 17 days, 17 days before the actual date he was born. He was born on June 19th, right? So this is just outstanding. It's fantastic. I'm so excited that baseball did this. I think that it was long overdue, and now we have Lou Gehrig honored every single year. ALS research upped that much more, and it was just a great thing by baseball across the board. Really. Terrific stuff. ML Sports Platter brought to you by Brian Comboy of Mass Mutual New York State. Tax-efficient retirement planning with Brian. Make sure you go with him today. He's on LinkedIn and Facebook and advisors.massmutual.com. Brian Comboy is the official financial advisor of the ML Sports Platter. A big tip of the cap thank you as well to our good pals at Rosie's Corner, Welch & Company Jewelers, and the Vince Aguirre Consulting Group. Log on to vcgtransforms.com. Become a better leader both personally and professionally. Scott and his team have a ton of programs for you to jump into right now. vcgtransforms.com is the website for that. And a tip of the cap thank you for the support from the Swan and Whitaker families for the platform as well. Hit me on Twitter at Mike L Sports. Download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review for this very podcast, the ML Sports Platter. And hey, as I always tell you, enjoy the games.